Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jadley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so delighted and so very honored and so very grateful that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Lindsay Gizicki. She'll be here to celebrate to the moon and back. Before we invite Lindsay into the studio, we want to invite you to follow us on social media. We love connecting with our fans on social media. Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids. At Reading With Your Kids on Instagram. Be sure to check out the at Reading With Your Kids or the Reading With Your Kids page on Pinterest. And if you are on Twitter, please follow us at Jedley Magic. We also would love it if you could go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You can sign up for our free newsletter. You can also use the contact button at the top of the page to send us a message. Let us know what we're doing right. Let us know what we could do better. And absolutely, please let us know who you think we should have on the podcast. Joining us right now from the great and chilly state of Michigan, our guest today is here to celebrate her debut picture book. It's called To the Moon and Back. Please welcome to the show, Lindsay Gizicki. Hey, Lindsay, how are you?
Hi, Jed. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm delighted to have you on. You know, the title of your book is, as soon as I read it, I thought Jackie Gleason and the Honeymooners. To the moon, Alice, to the moon.
Yeah, close, right? Yeah.
So I'm guessing we're not talking about, 1950s questionably acceptable domestic violence. We're talking about something a whole lot different happening in your book.
Yes, absolutely. To the Moon and Back is a fun adventure story between a mother and her child. It was kind of an idea adapted from my own mischievous child. My daughter one day said, if Henry, which is my son, if Henry's going to end up on the moon one day, Mom, if we're not careful. I said, you know what, that's all right, because we're just going to have to go get him, won't we? And my husband was like, that's a really cute story for a children's book. So here comes To the Moon and Back. And it's a story about a child who keeps ending up in space through some ridiculous means. His homemade rocket launches him into space. His balloon carries him, above the clouds. And the mom does her own creative ways of going and getting him back. So, yeah, it's just a fun story between a mother and her child.
That is delightful. And talk about, a really comforting book to have this. And it's funny, I just finished binging a series called As We See It, which is an Amazon Prime show that is focused on the life of three neurodiverse adults, three adults that are on the autism spectrum. And the bottom line, there's lots of different situations, but the bottom line that these three adults are desperately seeking connection and seeking people who are going to be in their lives and to help keep them safe. That's what your book is all about. It's about letting your child know, no matter where you go, I'm going to be there to help you out.
Exactly. And that was, as a mother, that was my motivation behind the book. Here's a way to express, even if it's crazy, because how am I going to get into space? But that's just the magnitude of my love for my child, and every mother's love for their child is we would go through these ridiculous means to make sure our kids are always safe and that they know we're going to be there for them.
Yeah.
And that was just a way for me to express that love in this book, and in a funny, goofy way that hopefully all parents can relate to.
Sure. And it's a funny, goofy way, which is perfect, because it's a different way to say, I love you.
Exactly. And it's a way maybe that a child can understand the, very complex idea of love is, how far we would go for them.
Yeah. I'm wondering, speaking about love, when your husband said to you, well, that would make a great subject for a children's picture book, did you respond by saying, yeah, it would, but I got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. Where am I going to find time to do this? Thanks very much.
Between that and I do have a full-time job, too, that I somehow managed to try to do from home with my children. Yeah, it's just been about finding time to do that. But when you have such motivation to do things, you find the time to do them, right? Because it makes you happy. So things that make you happy, you kind of work into your schedule. So he went off to work that day, and I sat down with pen and paper, and I just wrote it. And it took like a few days of kind of perfecting. And there it was, like on pen and paper, and it just like kind of flowed through me. So it's actually pretty easy to find the time because it just came very natural to me to, express myself in that way, I guess.
Yeah, neat. And you actually did it the old-fashioned way, pen to paper.
Yes. I went to school for journalism, so there are some things that I can't kind of get rid of. So when I need to write thoughts, I can't just pick up my phone and, turn on the notepad. I have to do pen and paper. And I think I'm always going to be that way now because here I am in my mid-30s and I haven't let go of that concept. And I also still like to hold physical books and I like newspapers too. And it's just some things I can't shake.
Yeah. Some people may have to Google the word newspapers to know what that is. They were very popular and for a lot of different reasons. To read, get information, put on the floor when you have a puppy,
Yeah, I know. Here in Michigan, we still get our local newspapers to our doorstep once a week. And I love it. I love it so much. I can't wait. And my daughter now loves it because she looks forward to getting it every week. So I've kind of passed on that love for newspapers to my daughter, and hopefully they're still around when she's older.
Yeah. I do miss a newspaper. I was a paper boy from third grade to high school, and we did it in different ways. I actually delivered the newspapers. I also was on the street hawking newspapers. Hey, headlines! So I was one of those guys. And I miss it, and I have a digital subscription to the paper that I delivered, but it's just not the same.
It's not. It's really not. Yeah, it's an experience of holding it in your hands and getting it to your doorstep or however you received it. But yeah, no, it's different. Yeah.
Now, as a journalist, do you still write in that kind of shorthandy thing? Because I remember being interviewed by reporters, and they would ask me a question. I'd give them a 3 or 4 minute answer, and then they'd scribble something in 2 seconds, and I'm like,
yes.
How does that work?
Yeah, I do. If you can believe it, I actually do. Yeah. And it's small, so it can just fit wherever you have it. So it's not big and bulky. I learned the hard way when I was first starting off in this industry that if I try to bring an actual notebook size pad, it's just not going to work. So yeah, the little pads actually serve a purpose in that aspect.
Yeah. And if you don't know what we're talking about, it's just incredible. No, newspaper reporters and journalists say, "We just keep this little thing about the size of an index card and would fit in their shirt pocket, and they could go out and they could write a novel, in that little thing."
Yeah, watch any movie starring a journalist in the 80s, and you'll see them using it.
So, you were sharing with me before we started that To the Moon and Back was printed by Hankaroo, which is your imprint. So obviously your goal isn't one and done. This isn't something you just wanted to say I did. You have a passion to create more in this series.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always wanted to write books. Like I said, I went to school for journalism, and that's my day job. But books was always kind of just in the back of my mind. I couldn't shake that. And I knew I wanted to either be a writer or work with other writers, but publishing kind of was my end game. And yeah, so when I started writing this book and I was kind of looking into the realm of what book publishing kind of entails, I came across a lot of self-published authors who found a lot of success and were able to, keep it to how they envisioned their books, and they had a lot of control over that. And some of them started their own imprints, and they kind of built this brand. And I thought, wow, well, my kids inspired this book, and I have so many other ideas that are inspired by them. So I looked into starting my imprint, and it's Hankaroo Readings, which is named after both my children, their nicknames. And yeah, so we're just going to do adventure stories, and To the Moon and Back is going to be a series, and we're going to take, mother and her child other places. And I have other series in mind too that my kids have inspired. And it kind of all started from my daughter. She's really creative, and I started doing this thing when I put her to bed, is I have her tell me a bedtime story. And it just has fostered this creativity that she already had, but has kind of honed in on now, because by telling these stories, she has to come up with plots and character traits. And I found that she's thinking ahead more, and she's thinking, what are these characters going to do? And it's her imagination has inspired my imagination. And I never thought when I got into writing it would be children's books, but my life these days revolves around my kids, and it just has been very natural to me.
What? We've had a number of really exceptional authors on the program, some that have sold millions of books around the world. Jerry Spinelli, Jane Yolen come to mind right away. Both of those authors said, that they don't agree with the kind of usual advice to authors to write what you know. They said that you should write what you love. And it's obvious that you have a great deal of love for your kids, so it makes a lot of sense for you to write about what you love.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, as a mom, I'm still learning. It's always a learning curve, right? And yeah, my passion for my kids has seeped into other aspects of my life. And I created this imprint for them, and yeah, it just honors that love for them. And I'm so excited to share all the other adventures that we have coming.
Yeah. Now, I like a couple of things. I love a couple of things that you've been talking about. Number one is having your daughter tell you a bedtime story. I think that's so neat, and I think it's really empowering. So I hope a lot of folks who are listening try that, because that's also really fun. You also shared with us that you have a day job as a journalist. You have a night job as a writer. So you're writing in both of those jobs, but writing in very different ways. As a book writer, you're coming up and you're creating the story. As a journalist, you're supposed to be reporting on the story. And we hear so many things going on that journalism has really changed, and that in a lot of venues, people are not necessarily reporting the facts and just the facts, but they're also taking the facts to push forward a narrative, no matter what side of the aisle. And it happens on both sides of the aisle, on all 5 sides of the aisle. How can we help our kids become more literate when it comes to the media that they're consuming? How can we help them discern what is fact, what might be propaganda, what might just be outright misinformation?
I love that you asked this question, because as a journalist, and I obviously went to school for journalism, that's been really tough for me to watch the last few years, is to watch a field that I loved and still love and went into and had a passion for kind of morph in all the wrong ways, it felt like. And I don't cover breaking news, so I've kind of kept myself out of that. I actually cover architecture and engineering. That's my specialty in journalism. But to watch it, I think it's important to tell our kids, just find different sources. And just because you read one idea, it's not the only idea. And it's important to kind of keep an open mind, especially with things that you come across on the internet, as we've all learned, that it don't take that for fact. And to find other sources that, will tell you a different side of things. And doesn't mean that source is going to be true either. but it's really important to find the sources that are trustworthy. And I've kind of had to teach my parents that, because a lot of times my parents have gone down a rabbit hole of things that they see on certain news channels. And I have to tell them, okay, but that news kind of caters to one side. So, here's the news channels that'll give you, it's not opinion, and it's just bland facts. It's how journalism was supposed to be. And I've kind of had to steer them towards those channels, because I found that, especially during quarantine here in Michigan, it's COVID, as I'm sure has been kind of bad in Michigan. Mm-hmm. So we've had a lot of quarantine, and it was really rough for my parents in the first part of that, because they couldn't leave the house. And what do? You watch TV, and what's on TV? Oh, it's the news. And and it's only, if you're only watching one channel, then you're only getting one side of things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, because it's been hard to watch in the last few years. And, you want someone who's kind of independent and is independent from their sponsors. And you also have to look at that, like who really owns this news channel. And a lot of times that's the reason why you're getting the news that you're getting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. There have been many times that I've sat down. A couple of things baffle me. One is, news channels tend to grab onto one topic and just beat it to death. You're reporting on the same story for 24 hours now, and nothing's really changing. We're not talking about a hostage situation where moment to moment there's new news. It's talking about a statement somebody made or a decision that was made, and now we have to talk about it for 24 hours, and then we forget about it. We move on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. But it's been very fascinating, somewhat amusing, and also really sad to sit and watch one station and then switch over to the next news station and watch the same story being told. And it's like, I just looked at the same thing from like two completely, I got a view from Mars and I got a view from Saturn. And where does the truth lie?
It's usually somewhere in the middle. Yeah. And it's, like you said, it is a lot of exploitation, because at the end of the day, the news, their goal isn't so much to deliver the news, but to gain viewers. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, when they're doing things like that, it's upping their viewership. So they're doing exactly what they want it to do. But I actually had a really hard time with that when COVID first hit. I was also 7 months pregnant. Mm-hmm. So it was rough for me back then. And as a journalist, like I said, I don't cover breaking news, but I cover architecture and engineering in the construction world. And there was a big push to cover everything COVID and how it's affecting, construction. And I found myself being really overwhelmed. And I just was like, can we cover something else? Because I have blocked all news on my phone as a pregnant woman, and they're telling me how scared I should be. And now it's like my main job was supposed to be, it's supposed to distract me from that, is now covering everything COVID, and it was just really overwhelming.
Yeah. You brought up something that I think is important to tell kids when we're talking to them about the media and helping them become more media literate, is this idea of what's the intention? Why is this source reporting on this in such a way? And as you said, it's to get more viewers, to get more sponsorship. I think if we help our kids understand that all media is created by somebody intentionally with a purpose. In the case of To the Moon and Back, the purpose was to tell a story about love. The intention and the purpose behind other creation of media, it's different, and it's important for kids to know that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that can go into other things when you're trying to teach kids, about the world in general. Just explain to them, it's not always, rainbows and puppies. Sometimes this happens. And to explain to them, because they're young, but they understand complex, ideas and thoughts. And, that's kind of what I've learned watching my daughter tell her stories, is that she's kind of taken even just the concept of her learning new words. She's taken those words, but now she has to put them in context. Mm-hmm. So now she has to take new words and learn how to use them. And that general idea can kind of go into teaching them about how the world works. Yeah.
Yeah. Does your daughter create new words?
She does. I just had this conversation with my mother-in-law who came here to watch them so I could do this podcast with you. She said she keeps asking for a napkin towel. What's a napkin towel? And I'm like, it's napkin and paper towel. And she wants a napkin towel. No matter how many times I tell her napkin or paper towel, it's napkin towel.
Well, I love that. And we used to celebrate that. There were lots of things that my kids came up with when they were younger. And we just kind of went with it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then my favorite one for my son is he loves squirrels. So where we live, there's a ton of squirrels, but I don't know if it's because he can't say squirrel yet, but he calls them gucks. Just gucks. And it's kind of, I have started saying guck instead of squirrel.
Before we go, I wanted to talk to you. We mentioned COVID a number of times. Hopefully, at some point in the near, not too distant future, this will be over. We'll be on the other side of it. But your son, his entire life has been living in COVID lockdowns in one way or the other. Your daughter, half of her life has been spent. How do you think? Because when it's over and when people say it's okay to go outside without a mask and we don't need a fourth and fifth or seventh booster, maybe we do, but we're okay with that. It's not going to be over for your kids. Your kids are going to be living with this forever. How do you think that might affect them in the future?
I'll be honest, it does worry me because even times where I've taken my daughter, who will be 4 in June, even when I've taken her to the playground, she kind of doesn't know how to be around other kids. And it's kind of been standoffish, and it's kind of broken my heart that she doesn't know how to play and be a kid. And I worry about that. And I also worry that, being in lockdown and, being anxious about everything and washing her hands all the time. And kids are like sponges, right? I mean, they know when we're anxious, they know when we're upset, and they just kind of take all that in, but they don't know what it is, and they don't know how to unleash it. Mm-hmm. I worry that she's going to have anxiety at a very young age. And as someone who has anxiety and had it at a young age, I can see that already forming. And it makes me nervous. That's one of the things I worry about. And my son, he's very, very attached. And he's got a lot of separation issues because, unlike my daughter, I don't leave the house. Mm-hmm. When I had her, I went to an office and I left. And now I work from home, and he's not used to me going anywhere because of COVID. Even in my spare time, I don't go anywhere because a lot of times in Michigan it's too cold, so we can't go outdoors and we can't gather in indoor places. So he's gotten used to me being around a lot, and he's become very dependent on mostly me, not so much my husband, because my husband still goes to an office job. And I worry about anxiety with my daughter. I worry about their social skills. I worry about him, needing me a little bit too much when it's his time to go to preschool. And those are a lot of my worries that I have with them. And I think we're going to see that. I mean, we're seeing it right now with teenagers, that how affected they've been by COVID. And it's going to be a whole new era, I think, of, addressing some mental health and emotional issues that we have probably forever will have from this experience.
The good thing is that parents like you are aware of that, and hopefully they're taking the time to prepare themselves by reading great kids' books that address it and remind kids that they're loved no matter what. And I think that To the Moon and Back is going to be one of those tools that can help a lot of that anxiety, just helping kids remember that I got your back. We can do this together.
Absolutely. And I hope that's one of the messages that families get when they read it together.
Yeah. Hey, Lindsay, where can people go to find out more about To the Moon and Back and find out more about you and the future books that you'll be bringing to the world?
Absolutely. Well, you can visit us on our website at hankarureadings.com, and you can learn all about who we are and books we have coming up.
Excellent. We've had a wonderful time speaking. We spoke about a lot of different stuff here on the podcast.
Did.
You know, we went from talking about a cute little picture book to media literacy and COVID, and that's what I love about the podcast. We've been talking to the author of To the Moon and Back, the debut picture book by our guest, Lindsay Gizicki. Hey, Lindsay, thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Heather Davis. She'll be here to celebrate Into Justin's World. Heather is a fascinating person. Justin, Into Justin's World. This book is based on the life of her son. He is a child with severe developmental disabilities, someone that Heather adopted. Heather is also the mom of eight kids in total, 2 of them biological kids. 5 of Justin's siblings were also adopted. It's a really fascinating and heartwarming conversation that you do not want to miss. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guest, Lindsay Gizicki. Please be sure to check out To the Moon and Back. I want to thank my team, Alhana Doherty, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Skylar Strauss. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.